because we have affected the interests of many people. There is social inequality, there is corruption, there is poor management of public health. If we try to straighten all this, inevitably, we will affect the individual interests of some people.
For decades, Africa has been ruled not by its people, but by forces lurking in the shadows. Colonizers may have left, but their grip never loosened. They control the wealth, the resources, and the leadership. And those who resist? They don't last long. But something has changed. A new leader has emerged, a man who refuses to bow, a man who has done the unthinkable, defied the empire. His name is Ibrahim Traoré. He took power in a nation that was never meant to rise. Burkina Faso, a land rich in gold, yet drowning in poverty. A land exploited for generations, yet never free. Traoré looked at history and chose a different path. He threw out foreign troops. He seized back his country's resources. He rejected Western control, and for that, they want him gone. This is not a coup story. This is not just another African uprising. This is a war, a silent war. A war fought with bribes, assassins, and propaganda. A war worth billions. And Traoré? He is at the center of it. The West has tried everything: economic sabotage, media attacks, political infiltration, and assassination attempts. But he is still standing. And now, the question is no longer whether they will stop him. The question is, can they? Burkina Faso was never supposed to resist. It was supposed to follow the script written decades ago: stay obedient, remain dependent, and allow the quiet plunder of its resources. For generations, leaders came and went, but the real power never changed hands. It remained in the grip of Western financiers, multinational corporations, and foreign governments who controlled the nation's wealth from afar. The politicians who played by their rules were rewarded with financial aid, foreign investments, and diplomatic favor. Those who did not, they were swiftly removed. This system functioned with brutal efficiency. The elections, the economic policies, the security measures, all of it was carefully managed from behind the scenes. The country's gold, uranium, and strategic land were carved up and controlled by Western companies under the guise of development partnerships. Military bases were stationed in the country under the justification of fighting insurgents, but in reality, they served as footholds to ensure Burkina Faso never became truly independent. Then, something happened that the West had not prepared for. Ibrahim Traoré disrupted the system. Unlike his predecessors, he was not a politician molded in foreign institutions. He did not graduate from Western-funded leadership programs designed to groom future African presidents. He did not seek approval from Paris or Washington before making decisions. He was a soldier, hardened by battle, forged in the chaos of Burkina Faso's fight for survival. And when he took power, he did something unthinkable. He severed the country's dependency on the West. From the moment he declared that Burkina Faso would no longer be a playground for foreign interests, alarms went off in embassies across the world. Within days, intelligence reports flooded Western agencies, outlining the urgent need to contain and remove him. Traoré's refusal to cooperate was not just a political inconvenience, it was a direct threat to the entire system of foreign control that had existed for decades. If he succeeded, other African nations might follow. The response was immediate. The West deployed its most effective tool: financial warfare. The first blow came in the form of economic isolation. Overnight, Burkina Faso was labeled as a risky environment for foreign investment. International lenders began restricting access to credit, and foreign aid, previously a tool used to control the country's policies, was suddenly withdrawn. But it wasn't just financial institutions tightening their grip. Global commodity traders, who had long dictated the price of Burkina Faso's exports, began manipulating market conditions, making it harder for the country to profit from its own gold and agricultural goods. At the same time, Burkina Faso's banking system came under siege. Western-controlled financial institutions, including those operating within Africa, began delaying transactions, freezing assets linked to the government, and discouraging international partners from engaging with the country. Trade agreements that had been stable for years were abruptly renegotiated under pressure from foreign governments. Burkina Faso, once reliant on a carefully maintained economic pipeline, now found itself choked by the very system that had once sustained it. But financial pressure was only the first phase. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. When it became clear that Traoré was not breaking under economic strangulation, the next stage of the operation began: political subversion. Western embassies, long embedded in Burkina Faso's political landscape, became command centers for a coordinated effort to undermine the government from within. Former political figures, many of whom had been removed after Traoré's rise, were suddenly given new life. They began appearing on international platforms, warning of Burkina Faso's descent into dictatorship. Reports began circulating in Western-funded think tanks and policy groups, arguing that Traoré's leadership was creating instability. Burkina Faso's opposition parties, previously fractured and disorganized, suddenly found themselves flush with funding. Political activists, student groups, and civil society organizations that had once been struggling were now operating with remarkable resources. Foreign-backed NGOs, operating under the guise of human rights advocacy, began organizing anti-government campaigns, creating the illusion of widespread internal discontent. The message being crafted was clear. Traoré's government was losing support, and the people of Burkina Faso wanted change. This narrative was then amplified by Western intelligence agencies, which worked in the shadows to escalate tensions. Secret meetings were held between foreign diplomats and Burkinabe military officers, where discussions revolved around alternative leadership options. Key government officials were approached, some subtly, others directly, with offers of power and wealth in exchange for betraying Traoré. The goal was not just to weaken the government's authority, it was to lay the groundwork for a coup. But Traoré was not an easy target. Unlike past leaders who had been entangled in Western alliances, he operated outside their reach. His intelligence network, built on loyalty rather than financial incentives, exposed several coup attempts before they could even be set in motion. Arrests were made, foreign agents were expelled, and Burkina Faso's internal security forces launched one of the largest counter-operations in its history to dismantle the networks of foreign influence. The West was growing impatient. If financial and political warfare could not remove Traoré, then something more extreme would have to be considered. This marked the shift into the most dangerous phase: direct sabotage and assassination attempts. Foreign operatives began infiltrating Burkina Faso's security agencies. Western-backed mercenaries, previously active in other destabilized regions, were seen moving closer to Burkina Faso's borders. Intelligence reports indicated that arms shipments, disguised as humanitarian aid, were being funneled into neighboring countries, likely to be used by insurgents looking to create chaos within Burkina Faso. Then came the most brazen move yet. A Western-connected financial syndicate offered a staggering $8 million to Burkinabe soldiers to turn against their leader. The message was simple: take the money, remove Traoré, restore Western control. But what happened next stunned the world. Instead of accepting the bribe, the soldiers exposed the operation. The coup attempt was dismantled before it could begin, and those involved were arrested. The West had underestimated the loyalty Traoré had built, not just within his government but among his people. With every failed attempt, the urgency to remove Traoré increased. The strategies became more aggressive, the stakes higher. But in every confrontation, Traoré survived. And the longer he remained in power, the more Burkina Faso's people rallied behind him. The West was running out of options. But it was clear they were not willing to walk away just yet. And so, the next phase would begin. If bribes, political subversion, and financial warfare could not break Traoré, then the solution would have to be something much deadlier. This was no longer just a power struggle. It was a fight to the death. For most world leaders, the greatest threat comes from politics. Elections, protests, and opposition movements can challenge their rule. But for Ibrahim Traoré, the threat is far more lethal. His enemies do not want to remove him through negotiations, nor do they seek to pressure him into submission. They want him dead. In the world of high-stakes geopolitics, Assassinations are rarely acknowledged, but they happen more often than the public realizes. A plane crash, a sudden illness, a mysterious explosion. All are methods of eliminating those who refuse to play by the rules. In Burkina Faso, Traoré has survived over 20 such attempts on his life. The sheer number of failed assassinations is unheard of in modern African politics. It is not just an indication of how many enemies he has made, it is a sign of how desperate the West has become. Each failed attempt is met with another, more sophisticated, more ruthless, more carefully planned. The goal is simple. If he will not surrender, he must be silenced. From the moment Traoré took power, intelligence reports suggested he was being targeted. His government security agencies began intercepting encrypted communications between foreign diplomats, mercenary groups, and regional actors with Western ties. These messages revealed coded discussions about handling the situation and finding a resolution to the crisis. But within military and intelligence circles, everyone knew what this meant. Traoré was on an active kill list. At first, the attempts were crude. The next attempt was more direct. But it all failed. When internal methods failed, the focus shifted to external forces. Western intelligence agencies have long worked with private military contractors, highly trained groups operating outside the boundaries of traditional armies. Unlike government soldiers, these mercenaries leave no official trace, no fingerprints. Their missions are deniable. If they succeed, there are no questions. If they fail, their employers simply disavow any knowledge of their existence. By early 2023, multiple reports indicated that foreign mercenaries had been deployed in West Africa with the singular goal of eliminating Traoré. These were not local insurgents or rebel fighters. They were professionals, trained in covert operations, ex-special forces with a history of carrying out assassinations on behalf of powerful nations. One of the most alarming incidents occurred when a group of foreign operatives attempted to infiltrate a high-level military meeting attended by Traoré and his closest advisors. The plan was simple: pose as security personnel, get close enough, and execute him before any response could be mounted. But Burkina Faso's counterintelligence unit had already detected unusual movements within the capital. Security was heightened, identity verifications were intensified, and the entire meeting was moved to an undisclosed location. The operatives vanished into the shadows, but the message was clear. They were getting closer. As each assassination attempt failed, the strategies became more advanced. Drones began appearing over sensitive military sites, tracking Traoré's movements. Unmanned aerial vehicles, capable of both reconnaissance and targeted strikes, were spotted hovering near government compounds. Burkina Faso's air defense systems had to be activated on multiple occasions, forcing the drones to retreat. Perhaps the most audacious attempt to eliminate Traoré came in the form of cold, hard cash. A Western-connected financial syndicate offered $8 million to Burkinabe soldiers to turn against their leader. The deal was simple: accept the money, eliminate Traoré, and restore foreign control. This was not an impulsive move. It was calculated. A last resort after repeated failures. But once again, the West had underestimated the depth of loyalty Traoré had built. The soldiers who were approached did not take the money. Instead, they reported the bribe to the government. The coup attempt was dismantled before it could even begin, and the operatives involved were swiftly neutralized. The incident sent shockwaves through Burkina Faso's leadership. The realization that enemies were not only outside the country, but also within its military forced a complete overhaul of security protocols. Elite units were reassigned, access to Traoré was further restricted, and intelligence operations became more aggressive. Burkina Faso was no longer just defending against external threats, it was purging its ranks of anyone remotely connected to foreign interference. Despite more than 20 failed assassination attempts, Traoré remains alive. But for how long? Each failed attempt forces the West to recalibrate, to come up with new strategies and more ruthless measures. If traditional assassinations do not work, what comes next? Will they attempt a large-scale military strike disguised as an internal rebellion? Will they frame him for a crime so severe that it justifies international intervention? Will they push for economic collapse, hoping that internal instability forces him out? One thing is certain: they will not stop, and neither will Traoré. For most leaders, survival is a matter of strategy, compromise where necessary, and knowing when to bow before greater powers. But Ibrahim Traoré is not like most leaders. His defiance is not just about rejecting foreign influence. It is about actively dismantling the very structures that have kept Burkina Faso and much of Africa under Western control. And his counterattack has already begun. Traoré does not play defense. He does not sit back and react. Every move against him, every attempted assassination, every economic blockade, every smear campaign has been met with an aggressive response. He understands that to simply survive is not enough. If Burkina Faso is to remain free, it must become untouchable. It must build an alternative system, one that cannot be controlled by foreign governments, Western banks, or media propaganda. This is the war Traoré is fighting, and he is not fighting it alone. Before Burkina Faso could stand against external enemies, it first had to purge the enemies within. Traoré knew that many of the coup attempts and assassination plots were not just orchestrated by foreign intelligence agencies. They were aided by Burkinabe politicians, military officials, and corporate elites who had long profited from Western control. These individuals, often trained in Paris or Washington, had spent their careers serving as intermediaries between Burkina Faso and its foreign rulers. Traoré's first countermeasure was a complete security overhaul. He launched one of the most aggressive anti-corruption crackdowns in Burkina Faso's history, removing dozens of high-ranking officials suspected of maintaining secret ties with foreign governments. Many were quietly detained, others fled, seeking asylum in neighboring countries or Western capitals. The purge was not a symbolic gesture. It was a decisive action that shut down the networks that allowed foreign intelligence agencies to operate freely inside Burkina Faso. His second move was fortifying the military. Traoré understood that Burkina Faso's independence would mean nothing if its military could be bought. He knew that foreign diplomats and intelligence officers had spent years cultivating loyalists within the armed forces, officers who could be used to overthrow the government if the time came. To counter this, he restructured the chain of command, reassigning officers with questionable loyalties and promoting those who had proven their commitment to the nation. He cut off all Western military training programs, replacing them with strategic partnerships with Mali, Niger, and Russia. The message was clear: Burkina Faso was no longer for sale. Once internal security was reinforced, the next step in Traoré's counterattack was economic independence. For decades, Burkina Faso's financial system had been tied to Western-controlled institutions. The Central Bank of West African States, BCEAO, which oversees the CFA franc, a currency still controlled by France, was a direct tool of financial domination. Every economic decision, every major transaction, was ultimately linked back to a European financial system that could freeze funds, block investments, or cripple the economy at will. Traoré made it clear, this system had to be dismantled. His government began discussions with BRICS nations, particularly Russia and China, to create alternative banking systems that would allow Burkina Faso to operate outside Western financial constraints. Rather than storing reserves in European banks, Burkina Faso began shifting its assets into alternative financial institutions. The government also redirected its gold trade, cutting down exports to Western nations and instead forging direct agreements with non-Western partners who offered better terms and no political strings attached. To ensure that Burkina Faso never again became dependent on foreign aid, Traoré also increased investment in national industries. His administration announced major projects in energy production, agriculture, and infrastructure, aimed at making the country self-sufficient. Burkina Faso's leadership was no longer waiting for economic opportunities to be granted by the West. It was building its own. Traoré's resistance was never just about Burkina Faso. He knew that a single nation, no matter how determined, could not stand alone against the world's most powerful empires. If true sovereignty was to be achieved, Burkina Faso needed allies, nations willing to break away from Western control and form an independent bloc. And so, he forged a revolutionary partnership with Mali and Niger. These three nations, all of which had removed Western-backed governments, joined together in a historic military and economic alliance. For the first time, a new power structure was emerging in Africa, one that was not reliant on the United States, France, or the European Union for security. Traoré's vision was clear: an Africa that protects itself, governs itself, and prospers without foreign interference. But the fight is far from over. Western nations are watching, calculating their next move. Sanctions, direct military intervention, and even more aggressive assassination attempts are still on the table. Burkina Faso remains a prime target, and as long as Traoré continues to stand, the empire will keep coming for him. The question now is, what will they try next? And more importantly, will Traoré be ready? Let us know in the comments section. Can they take Traoré down? Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.